Okay, and I am going to be sharing. Where are you? Okay. Well, apparently I have like 200 windows open of different things. So let me try one more time. There we go. Okay. Can we all see my slides?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so welcome. Thank you for spending your afternoon with me. Not all afternoon, just the hour. Thank you so much, John, for everything you're doing to keep us trained up. So we're talking about small group work that works versus groups that fail, and most of the content here is developed and inspired by the cooperative learning work done by the Johnsons. So I have a credit to them at the bottom, particularly the first few slides that comes more directly from their work. So we're going to talk about, in fact, let's just get started on the slides here. So we're going to be focusing on cooperative learning. In other words, groups that are cooperative in nature. Um, I just have too many things open. I have to hide a few things here so I can see my own slides. So what do we see in cooperative learning in class? We see a number of outcomes that are well supported in research. The Johnsons in particular were social psychologists, so they were strong in connecting the research on social cooperation to the classroom setting. So just as a very quick overview with no citations, but there are citations that support it. Cooperative learning in the classroom promotes higher academic achievement and increased retention, more frequent level, higher level reasoning, a deeper level understanding, more critical thinking, more on task behavior and less disruptive behavior, greater achievement motivation and intrinsic motivation, greater ability to view situations from others' perspectives. But wait, I have another slide. More positive, accepting, and supportive relationships with peers, regardless of sex, ethnicity, ability, social class, or disability differences, greater social support and social competencies, more positive attitudes towards the subject areas, learning and school, greater psychological health, adjustment, and well being, and more positive self esteem. So, a wide range of stronger outcomes related to cooperation. This it shouldn't be a huge shock because as a species, we have evolved to be cooperative and social, and we achieve many of our best things together. So today we're going to be talking about what the Johnsons refer to as informal cooperative learning. And so these are short-term groups. So they could be group activities that could range from like a 2-minute activity up to a full class period. But I'm not going to be focusing on examples of longer-term groups that might last a month or a full semester or a full year. We're also going to be focusing on techniques for face-to-face classes, but the general principles are applicable to any modality, to any group length, and actually to any setting. So if you're thinking about cooperative groups and you start thinking about a committee you're serving on, it is the same principles. They apply to all cooperative group settings. So I'll briefly review some of the principles, and then we're going to talk about some examples, both some positive and some negative examples. So there are 5 key elements of cooperative learning, and the Johnsons, recognizing great research in memory and learning, make a lot of things into acronyms that are easy to remember. So the 5 key elements of cooperative learning are PIG's face in their acronym. The more ridiculous it is, the better. It helps you remember. So PIG's face is a nice ridiculous acronym and explains why there is a pig on my slide. So this includes positive interdependence, where students need each other to succeed, and individual accountability, where each individual student must contribute. And although you need all 5 elements in order to really see great outcomes, you really, really need those first 2. You have to have a learning environment in which cooperation is necessary for success, and a learning environment in which each student has to contribute. Otherwise, you end up with issues. Group processing also, where you reflect on your group's teamwork skills. What did you do well working together? How can you improve together? So there's a consistent process of reflection and improvement in group work. Social skills, where you explicitly instruct small group and interpersonal skills. That one we'll talk about specifically. It's uh, often a critical, easy, quick, but missing piece in cooperative interventions in class. And face-to-face promotive interaction, where you create an opportunity for face-to-face encouraging interactions. And later I'll share with you a resource that lists out all 5 of these key elements and some suggestions on different ways you can incorporate those into different group activities. So now we do the examples because it's the examples for where it's at. So we're going to start with our group example number 1. This is the alternative to the any questions prompt that you give to your class. So you've just finished explaining a complicated concept in class, and now you ask any questions. What happens? Thank you. So I'm presenting on this tiny screen, by the way, so I can see like 3 of you and most of my slide on my tiny screen. And Paul, I saw you and you said this, which is a good answer. Often if you ask any questions, you get no questions, or you get a random question, or you know that if you just let it sit for a while, you might get a question, or it's just not a, even if you get engagement, you might get 5% of the class to engage with that question. Any questions? You get questions from 2 people in a 30-person class. The other 28 people are not thinking, not about what you want them to think about. So there are many alternative ways to do this in a cooperative setting. You just flip the question into a different question that is cooperative. So you can say, and in fact, sometimes when I teach, I find myself still saying any questions, and then I'll say, wait. What I mean is, turn to the person and pick a direction next to you, or on your right, or on your left, or in front of you, or behind you. Just pick one of those. Don't say all of those. That's too confusing. Turn to the person to your right or next to you and pick a cooperative prompt. Ask them a question about what we just talked about. Or let's say I'm a psychologist, a clinical psychologist. So let's say I'm teaching intro psych, and I've just taught about classical conditioning. So I'll say, ask the person next to you a question about classical conditioning, or explain this piece. Explain to the person next to you what the difference is between a stimulus and a response, or come up with 2 questions between the 2 of you. Come up with 2 questions about classical conditioning, or come up with a real life example of when you think you've experienced classical conditioning. Just one of those. Then give them an approximate time limit and an accountability component. So that could be, we'll talk about this. Oh, I have a typo. We'll talk about this for about 3 or 4 minutes, and then I'm going to call on some of you to tell us what you came up with. And then while they're talking for their 3 to 4 minutes, you circulate around while they talk, watching for and matching up students who didn't find a partner. Because you've just told them, talk to the person next to you. And if you have a pretty agreeable and compliant class, the first time you do this, 70 to 80% of the people will do it. And the other 20% will be like, and that's a whole mix of things. It's a mix of like people who are a little socially awkward might think, well, maybe I just don't have to do this. I'll just think about it. Or someone literally didn't hear anything what you said, and they don't know that they're supposed to turn to their neighbor. Or someone's on the end of a row and they haven't figured out who to turn to because everybody looks matched up. There's just a little mix of non-participation. So the first few times you do it, you have to circulate and make sure you get 100% participation. This is really easy. You go over and you say, oh, who are you talking with? Oh, what's this person's name next to you? Let's find out. Oh, this is Peter. Peter, is it okay if Jennifer talks to you? Okay, Jennifer and Peter, why don't you 2 talk about this question? You do that with a few pairs. The first couple times you do this, you never have non-participation again. Because people will know, you gave this instruction, you were serious about it. on my tiny screen. The captions are actually covering the bottom of my slide. So hold on. We will. There we go. What did I say? Oh, yes, that's what I said. Then have them thank each other at the end of their discussion time. So after your 3 or 4 minutes, you say, hey, turn to that person you were talking to, tell them thank you for their input, and then be sure to call on 2 to 3 pairs to report out. Have them report out their partner's name and what they talked about. Because your instructions were turn to the person next to you, introduce yourself, right? Introduce yourself. So you say, hey, what's your name? What's your partner's name? The first time you say that, everyone else will turn suddenly to each other and say, what's your name again? And then they'll remember that person's name, and then they'll have a friend in the class because they know that person's name. And you call randomly 2 or 3 people. First time you do it, call on confident people. Go right ahead, make it easy for them, make it easy for everybody. But it also makes it clear that there really is individual accountability here, that when you give students instructions about what they're supposed to be doing, you are serious and you expect them to do it. So a note about group size here. I said, turn to the person next to you. This is a very short activity, just a few minutes, like 3 or 4 minutes. So smaller is better. Ideally, your group size is going to be about 2 to 4, definitely not more than 4, because interpersonal complexity increases really rapidly, actually exponentially, as you increase group size, and individual accountability decreases very rapidly. You can go with bigger group sizes, like closer to 4, if you want to increase the interpersonal resources in the group or the knowledge base in the group. You should decrease the group size, going closer to 2. If your group time is really short, like if I say turn to your neighbor and talk for 3 or 4 minutes, if you've got 3 people in the group, one of them isn't going to have time to talk. Group time is short. If you want to increase the individual accountability, because it's very hard not to participate if there's only 2 of you in a group, you want to strengthen your group cohesion, or your class is not very skilled yet at cooperative learning. Now, if we were talking about formal cooperative learning, long-term groups that might extend for multiple weeks or for a semester, you can edge it up a little more, closer to 5 or so, because you might have students who are out, you might need more interpersonal resources and knowledge resources together. You just have to be much more careful about planning in those cases. A group size of 2, you just have to plan a little bit. You've got your individual accountability built in. So I said there were 5 key elements, right? Here's the 5 key elements again. Which ones were present in that short turn to your neighbor? I'm going to give you like 10 seconds to think, and then we're going to talk. Okay. All of them? Almost. Almost. Where was positive interdependence?
Students were talking with each other, finding out what each other knew, so therefore they needed each other to get them through this situation, this discussion.
Excellent. It's very hard to talk to your neighbor if you have no neighbor to talk to. You literally need the other person in order to do the activity. How about individual accountability, where each individual student had to contribute? They have to introduce themselves. That's good, Lynn. Where I might put that somewhere else, though. So an individual accountability, part of it is the biggest piece actually is where I say, I'm going to be calling on you to tell me what you talked about. And you don't have to call on everybody. You only, even in a big class, a class of 100 people, you could call on 4, and it gives the impression, if they're mixed up and kind of pseudo random, that anybody could be called on at any moment. Yes, I do a lot of cold calling in class, but I only do cold calling on questions that students have already thought about and talked about in a smaller group. So it's not as scary as just random cold calling, they have already talked about it and they know that I could talk with them. And I also allow them to pass or pass it to another person. If I call on somebody and they're like, I say, tap on your neighbor, the person that you talk to, have them tell us what, and they can like tap in. And I make that very obvious, and I'll usually plant it in the first one. In fact, I'll even call on someone and say, I'm going to call on you right now. Like in front of the class, I'll say this. I'm going to call on you right now. I want you to pass. I'll say, John, what did you guys talk about? John, pass. And he'll say, I pass. And then I call on someone else. And then it's clear that even John, who knows what's going on, just passed. So individual accountability is making it clear that even if you were talking to somebody else, if you weren't really listening and you don't have an answer, that's a problem. I didn't really give time for group processing. I didn't give the pairs time to reflect on how well they did in talking together. I did do social skills instruction. How did I do that? Lynn, I'm going to use your answer that you already typed in. They had to introduce themselves. I told them, yeah, thank you, Scott. I told them, introduce yourself. That's a social skill. And honestly, even if you're working with very experienced professionals, they will often skip this step, and it actually does make working together more difficult if you skip the introduction phase. And face-to-face promotive interaction, I also do during this. As I'm circulating around, I will make sure that people are turned towards each other and standing or sitting close enough to each other to be able to hear each other in our classroom environment. Um, that doesn't matter where the chairs are, it matters where their bodies are. So you can do it in any classroom. Okay, here is another example. And John, can we do breakout groups for this?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to need those in just a moment. So take a moment just on yourself right now. Keep your answer to yourself. Which of these is an example of building in individual accountability in cooperative learning activities? And more than one of these might be correct. So I'm going to give you about 15 seconds to come up with your own private answer.
How many rooms?
Pairs, groups of 2 or 3. Okay. Now, when I break you into groups, you're not going to see this question anymore. So go ahead and take a picture of it. Somebody should have, so you know what you're talking about. Take a quick picture on your phone. Okay, so let's take 3 minutes for you to talk about this question with a partner. If you're comfortable doing so, please turn on your camera because it'll be easier for you to interact. Make sure you introduce yourselves and that you make sure you agree on an answer and that you can each explain your answer. I'm going to say that one more time. Your goal here is to make sure you agree and that you can each explain your answer. Okay, thank you, John. We're ready.
I got sent to you, John.
Mhm. Oh, well, what happened is, yeah, I I moved you a different room because it was just with Kristen and I originally. So you should now see the option of room 4
Um,
Or
under
you can just
breakout rooms.
or you can just tell me what you think about that question.
Oh, that's right.
What do you think? I turned red again.
you did, sir. I was gonna say you got all red again.
What if I go stop the washer again? Oh. What do you think, Scott?
And I didn't take a picture fast enough, but I thought it was one, being able
Okay.
to explain um the answer or whatever. I think that's what each because I think that when you have to do that, that is taking accountability into. into.
I think that's a,
There
I
might
think
be other ones there, but again, I didn't take the pictures. I don't remember.
that's okay. I think that's, yeah, being ready to explain your group answer, I think is a good one. I think one that's controversial, that will be controversial in this group. Pick a spokesperson for your group to talk about your group answer. Is that individual accountability?
I guess if you're willing to accept the responsibility of being selected,
It is for that person,
yes.
but what about for the other folks?
If it's done as a not it
Mm.
type thing, then I would say no.
Mhm.
If it's a consensus discussion about why we're picking this person or something of that nature,
Mhm.
um,
I am literally going to walk away from my camera and see if that will reset it. Come on, come on.
Oh,
It
yeah.
Hey,
did. It did.
I have no idea why that would make any difference.
It's really weird.
What do you think, John? Is that long enough? It is a short question.
Oh, probably. Yeah, because it's going to take 60 seconds anyway before everyone
Yeah,
comes back.
let's close them.
But there could be peer pressure in the group to get that um, individual accountability to some extent.
Yes. Yes. Welcome back. It's with me working on one screen. It's such a relief when I'm not screen sharing, like, oh, look at all these people here. I can see them all.
I live in a two-monitor world. I can't go back to slumming with one monitor. It's just unacceptable.
I just like to work in many weird locations,
Right.
moving
No,
from
I
one
have a
side
I have
to
a
another. And
flat portable monitor I bought during COVID, and it's been a great buy because I can move all over the house and not give up my second monitor.
that's a good idea. Okay, what do we got? Oh, wait, I could ask for at this point, if it was a larger class, I might ask for a couple ideas. I'm going to call on you. You ready? Scott Cunningham. Who did
Good
you work with?
afternoon. I
Good
work with
afternoon.
Lynn Blanchfield from the history department.
Excellent. And give us one that you agreed together was an example of individual accountability.
We agreed on C, that each person in the group should turn in their own answers.
Uh-huh. Which any disagreements with that, by the way?
So we assumed it was in paper or something that was something feasible or hard copy to turn in.
Yeah, so if everybody turns in their own answer, then there's definitely each person has to be accountable for whatever is on that answer. Great.
Mm-hmm.
Ben Ogwell, do you
Yeah,
have another answer for us? Oh, who did you work with, by the way?
I work with Michael,
Excellent.
and we both agreed on A and C.
And tell us why A.
Now, we're just saying that we thought that because eventually they will be called upon, everybody will make that mental effort to contribute to whatever the group is going to agree on.
Be ready to explain your group answer and making it clear in the instructions that you mean everybody. Everybody should be ready to explain the group answer, not one person. You can't be like, well, that guy knows what we talked about,
Yeah.
which is the other choice, right? That was B, pick a spokesperson. I don't think that's a good example of individual accountability. Why not? You've been the group spokesperson before, by the way, in all kinds of stuff you've done, right? What happens?
It's everyone just kind of cedes to the group spokesperson, right? It's right.
Yep.
I
Yeah.
always
So
end up being the group spokesperson. I don't really like that technique.
now, of course, there are strong cooperative groups that are cooperative for other reasons. So you might be in a committee meeting or a meeting where people are all working together, and at the very end you're like, well, can you talk about that? And that's cooperative for other reasons. But if you just say at the beginning, you're going to be the spokesperson, it kind of gives everybody else permission to be like, they're going to figure out what to say. Now, assigning roles to each person in the group is a way that a lot of people have been trained, and is a great example of cooperative learning, because if everybody has a role that interlock, that's positive interdependence, right? They need each other to succeed. And since they all have a role, there's also individual accountability, because it'll be obvious if somebody doesn't do their role. It doesn't have all those pieces if only one person has a role. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. It just means you have to build in individual accountability in other ways. Excellent job. I hope you got a chance to thank your partner for working with you. And we will keep sharing. Okay, did we get some elements in that activity in which you talk to each other? Did we get positive interdependence? Did you need each other?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it would have been better if I'd visited the rooms, but such a short activity, it's hard to do that, because then you can see if somebody's like disappeared and someone else is on their own, and you can kind of keep that from happening in the future. You had individual accountability because anybody could be called on. We didn't really do group processing, but it was a very short activity. Social skills, I did say introduce yourself. I asked you to turn on your camera if you were comfortable, and that turning on the camera is also an opportunity for face-to-face promotive interaction. Excellent. So here's another example. You put up a sample quiz question, like the one we just did was a sample quiz question, but you notice individuals scattered around the class that are not working on it. Are they doing it in their heads, but not cooperatively? Are they just off task? You don't know. So what elements are missing here? How could we prevent this from happening or address it on the fly?
Can you share your screen, please?
Oh, well, I am reading it. No, I'm just kidding. I did get it ready to go. There we go. Better?
Yes, thank you.
I mean, I incorporated iClicker, just even in a face-to-face class, they have their group work and then they all have to answer individually, right, with their output, or like an exit ticket that's a work product. So in other words, there has to be some kind of product that is sort of turned into me digitally or on a piece of paper or something, so that they're kind of on task. And I will say incorporated, in small cases where it's been problematic. This was in my first year signature course in the first year, where I had to do this, but I basically have a category called professionalism, right, in the grade issue. And I've, actually around midterm time, I had to have a few private emails with students where I said, you weren't on task. You didn't, you clearly weren't doing this. This is, and this is really part of the course requirements. And it's something you're graded on, a firm but friendly conversation to have some accountability if it's a big problem. But I really think with a lot of group work, I really like to have some sort of work product that I have to produce.
Yeah. A quick think, pair, share. You may not need that. It's probably not worth the individual work product, but with an example like this, it's hard to know what went wrong, but there are certainly things you can do right then to address it. One thing that might have gone wrong is that your students don't have enough social skills experience yet. So they don't know how to start the conversation. So a quick circulation and being like, hey, you work with him, and you work with you, and you work with you. It gives them permission to do the turn to your neighbor. And it could address it right then. It could be that you were not assertive enough in your instructions. I don't mean like, you have to do this. I mean more like making it clear, these are instructions. We're going to do this thing. So you may have to just pause them and say, hold on, I think some of you didn't hear my instructions, and just restate them. I don't mean that as an assertiveness. I just mean like parsing it out. These are instructions. Listen now. Now we do the thing. It could be that you haven't set a structure strongly enough yet of individual accountability. So you could start setting that right then. You can say, hold on. I'm just going to double check. These were the instructions. What's your name? Did you hear my instructions? And what's your name? What are the instructions? Okay, now we're going to I'm going to call on you when you're done with this activity. But I really think the social skills piece would probably address this right away. That it may just be that initial, like, I don't know how to do this. It might address it. I have seen people, though, that their instructions didn't sound like instructions, so nobody listened. Like, oh, what if we do this? Yeah, that's not instructions. Here's another example, two-stage homework. This one's more of a lengthy example because it's for a lengthy activity, an activity that would probably take an entire class period, whether that's a 50-minute class period or an hour-and-a-half class period. So this is where you want students to really engage with the material. So you might do a homework assignment that gives them a little introduction, and then in class you do the harder stuff. So the example I'm going to give here is a complex case study. And I give them the easy part of the case study at home. So, and then in the in-class work, I have them do the more complex analysis together because I don't expect them to have the skills yet to do it individually. That's why we do it together. So the way I would structure this is you have the out-of-class individual homework assignment. By the way, I used to do this flipped, where the hard part was out of class. That didn't work very well, because I was assuming that students were ready to deeply engage with the material outside of class, and they were not ready for that. They were ready to get the introductory bites, and then they needed me and their peers to do the hard stuff. So I flipped that to be in class. So then in class, I assign them to groups and I give the instructions for the in-class part. Then I have group work time with the instructor circulating. Then I have a group report out, that accountability piece. With a whole class discussion, I might stick in a mini lecture there for reteaching if the whole class discussion shows gaps in their knowledge. And now I cannot see the bottom piece there. What do I have at the end there? Group processing, especially for a lengthy activity and for activities early in the semester where they are building their skills. Now, slides in which they are the slide I might show to the class, I have given them this light yellow background to make them stand out as like, this is kind of the thing that this is the activity, as opposed to my description of the activity. So an example of the individual homework, this class that I used to teach was on tests and measurements in psychology. So one of the things that we talked about near the beginning was measures of central tendency. So I had them read a short case study as part of their homework on 3 teachers that taught the same class with 3 different student test scores. And this was, I said it was like an elementary school level class, like a 5th grade class or something. And then I had them define each measure of central tendency that we were using, mean, median, and mode in that case, and calculate each of those measures for all 3 teachers. They didn't have a lot of students. This was an easy calculation they could have done with their phone calculator. Now, I did say assign to groups, right? Assign to groups. So let's have a note about assigning to groups. Never let students pick their own groups. Never, ever let students pick their own groups unless it's for an occasional quick interaction like a think, pair, share. Because if you assign them to groups for a think, pair, share, it's going to take you more time than the activity did. I can assign a class of 100 students to groups in 3 minutes. It doesn't take long to assign students to groups. It can be super fast, super on the fly. And in class, you can do it in a random fashion or in a stratified random fashion. So for example, in this test and measurements class, statistics was helpful and they had to have statistics, but not as a prerequisite. So some students had taken statistics first and some will take it after. So I would say, line up real quick. Everybody who's taken statistics, line up on this wall, and everybody who hasn't, line up on that wall. And I would say, because statistics is helpful for this question, but not necessary. And then I would count off the stat students into groups and count off the non-stat students. So every group ended up with a mix of people who had stats and people who didn't have stats. What you're looking for is diversity of knowledge, diversity of background, diversity in level of motivation. Randomness almost always does that for you, so you can just count them off in class. Again, shooting for group size of 3. For an activity like this, 3 would be great. What happens if you let them pick their own groups? First, they fall into pre-established social interaction patterns. So 2 people are friends and they always talk, they're always talking in class about stuff that is not about class. They will spend their whole group time talking about stuff not about class. They're also likely to pick people who look like them. So if they have friends, they'll pick their friends. If they don't have friends, they'll pick people who look as similar to them as possible, because we are designed as a species to look for in-group. It is an unfortunate truth. So not only will they match themselves on race and gender, they will look for subtle clues on SES and match themselves on clothes. They'll do whatever they can to find an in-group, and none of that will be conscious. They'll be looking a bit around and be like, who can I work with? That person looks like me. So then you end up with no diverse background, no diverse knowledge base, and often a similar level of motivation. They are responding to subtle cues. So you want diverse groups with no previous social interaction patterns. And it also helps them build teamwork skills with diverse people. Yes, exactly. So my example instructions in this class might be introduce yourselves and spend a few minutes talking about, and then I would use a non-threatening connection topic. I might say about your favorite dessert or sweet treat that you can get on campus. And then they spend a few minutes, they're like, oh, I love the blah, blah, blah. And I get this drink at in park, and oh no, I like this thing. And it gives them something to talk about and a way to connect. With your group, answer the following questions and add the answers to each of your homework assignments. So I give the student, given the student the test scores for these 3 teachers, which teacher do you think should receive a teaching award? Who would be your first choice for a special tutoring assignment with extra pay? And who would be the teacher you would want your own child to have? You can answer the same teacher for each or different teachers for each, and include a rationale for each answer of at least 3 sentences. So it does take, they really wrestle with this. It takes them a good hour of discussion sometimes. You're done when each person in your group understands and can explain each of the group's answers, and I'm going to give you 20 minutes for this part. I try and give the time limit to be a little on the short side of what I think they actually need, because you can always extend it. Okay? And then I circulate. And when I'm circulating, my focus is on supporting student learning, including accountability to the instructions, reteaching concepts as they come up in the group conversation, and modeling good cooperative skills. So I might ask them, hey, what was the favorite treat you said? Or what's their name? Because that's part of the instructions. I'm trying to hold them accountable to the instructions and encourage social skills. I'm going to notice if someone isn't being included. I might physically draw them into the group. I'll be like, oh, it looks like, what's your name? Oh, Beth. It looks like Beth can't actually hear the group conversation. Beth, how about you move closer, and can you, group members, let's turn so that our faces are facing each other, because then it's easier to hear each other. So I will draw people in. I'll praise good cooperation skills. Like, I really love how you are restating what other people say, because it shows that you're listening. And then I want to make sure also that the focus on their activity is on the rationale of their answer, because that's part of the instructions. For a long activity, I'll try and circulate fast for the first 10 minutes, because groups will always have logistics questions. And then I'll get those answered real quick. And then I have the group report out, the whole class discussion. This is an opportunity to draw out some of the important themes. I will randomly call on folks, and then be sure to follow up on your group goal. Your group goal is you are done when each person in your group understands and can explain each of the group's answers. Remember? It was right there, the group goal. So that means that I'm going to call on individuals to explain the group answers. And then, especially if this is early in the semester, one of their first long group activities, and often for longer group activities anyway, I will give them a group processing prompt. And this should take about 5 minutes. Say thank you to your group members, and then I give them a prompt of some type of group processing. This is a really easy one. Share at least one thing with each group member that you appreciated about working with them, because you're trying to help them reinforce strong group cooperative behaviors. Okay, which ones did I get? Did they need each other to succeed? Yes, partly because the question is actually hard enough that you need more than one person, but also because I told them the group goal is that when every person can do it, that's the goal. It's not that you can do it, it's that every person can do it. Do they have individual accountability? Where did I build that in? Everyone must be able to do it. Excellent. And I build it in somewhere else. Only I covered that really fast. I can go back if you want to see. Answer the following questions and add the answers to each of your homework assignments. So their answer needs to go on their homework. And it should actually be the same answer as the whole group because they're agreeing on an answer, but it needs to go on their homework. So that's also individual accountability. Group processing. Did we do group processing? Right here. Social skills. We had introductions. I was circulating, making sure people were, and I was encouraging face-to-face promotive interaction there as well, that they could see each other, that they could talk to each other, and that I was encouraging positive cooperative interactions. Okay, you got them? You got all 5 in mind? Here we go. Group example 5, the excluded group member. You notice that 3 group members are working together and seem to be excluding the 4th, or the 4th member complains to you that they are being left out. What design components are the issue here? How could you hopefully head this off with good design practices? Okay, I'll let you think about that for about 15 seconds, and then let's see what you got. Okay, any ideas here? Feel free to take yourself off mute or put it in the chat. Michael has absorbed the acronym. Excellent. So there's some weakness and positive interdependence, definitely, because they don't all need each other. They feel like they only need some of each other, as well as group processing, social skills. And yeah, there's issues all over here. How might you address this by strengthening these components? Maybe at the beginning, before this even happens, how might you design it so this doesn't happen?
One is you talked about the roles. So if everyone has a specific role, I think that's harder if they were reporting. So you build in a structured role or make, in some way to make sure everyone has an independent task to the outcome of the group. So
great, because structured roles really very quickly beef up the positive interdependence. Beef up the social skills element at the beginning. That's an excellent point. Because if I saw this happening in class, if I walked into a class and saw this happening, my first guess would be that the instructor allowed them to select their own groups. And that 3 of them knew each other and the 4th one didn't really. So by having randomized assigned groups by the instructor, you are usually heading this off. Another choice can be when a group activity extends beyond 1 day, and you've added the 4th member, like they were sick, and then they come the next day, and you haven't set up anything in the social skills component to help them be absorbed. So it could be something like, since we couldn't finish our activity the last day, we're going to finish it today. You got 4 people in your group. One person, why don't you give a summary of what you did? And the second person, you can set it up so that someone is reincorporated into the group very quickly. I have a question of the day. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Liz, that's a good suggestion. So the first thing I would do here, randomize groups. It helps a lot. Occasionally, if I'm using formal cooperative learning in which groups work over time, over the whole semester, I'll have much more lengthy, explicit social skills instruction. We might talk about group norms and set up examples of like, this is what we want to see in our groups, and then we might refer to them. For shorter term groups, you usually don't need to be that formal. We have a new example here. The non-contributing group member. I don't have time to write my section. I need to focus on writing my feature for the student newspaper. That's about real people. This is a direct quote from a student that my daughter had to work with in college. Younger daughter. What design components are the issue here, and how could you head this off with good design practice?
So would this be like a longer project then? Like a semester project more than a
It could be. It could be.
right.
It would be that would be a stretch in a single day.
Right. I mean, I think an element of a project has in a group like this, every group has to articulate their contribution to the group.
Yes. So individual accountability is clearly the main issue here, right? The student does not feel accountable for their actions in this class. So students can evaluate each other for processing. That's Scott Cunningham's suggestion. That's a great idea. When I use semester-long groups, I have multiple phases of peer evaluation that starts very gentle, and they give each other feedback and has a grade weight at the end. Another piece, honestly, I would head this off at the beginning by never having them do group writing. I never assign group writing, ever. Group writing is just really, really hard. Let's say that you, as a highly functioning professional, have a writing group you regularly co-author with someone. That is awesome. And you have that set up probably so that you never actually write together, right? Because writing together is not really a thing usually. You pass it off, but you each have a big stake in the game. You don't actually write together. You collaborate in phases. Writing together is very, very hard, and it's very hard to structure so that it is successful. It usually ends up, you know how it ends up, with disconnected sections that vary widely in their level of writing, and students don't actually learn anything about the other components. I would head this off by not assigning this project. Period. So if I want them to work together on something interesting about this topic, I would make it shorter and do it in class. And strengthen the individual accountability. The split up work. Actually, we have 10 minutes. Yes, we can do this one. Groups working together seem to be splitting up the activity. Like Brian is working on the first question and Tanisha is working on the second, and so on. And this is in class, so shorter activity. You're worried that at the end, they'll each only understand the parts they are working on, which is a very real fear if this is what's happening. What design components are the issue here? How could you head this off with good design? You can keep thinking. I'm going to start talking. To me, one of the issues here is that they believe they have a group goal, but they believe the group goal is completion. And completion is not a cooperative group goal. Completion you can do by yourself. So the instructor thinks they've built in positive interdependence, but they actually haven't. So it's rethinking what is your group goal and to make that group goal cooperative. So if the group goal is you need to complete these questions, it's much more efficient for them to split them up. If the group goal is that everyone needs to be able to understand the answers to all the questions, that's a cooperative group goal. Now, some of you are probably familiar with the jigsaw classroom technique. Yes, no. The jigsaw classroom technique was originally developed by a really amazing social psychologist as a way to break down barriers between people and draw people together across race and ethnicity, which is a wonderful goal. And it also happens to be an amazing cooperative learning activity. It usually takes multiple class sessions, but you do start by splitting up sections, but they're working cooperatively with other people. So it might be like Brian's working on question 1, and he's working with 3 other people from 3 other groups that are also working on question 1, and they're doing it together cooperatively. And then they come back to their home group and they teach each other. So they each have individual accountability, but the group goal at the end is that everybody understands all the pieces. Cooperative goal. The rude group member, also a real example from one of my daughters. Given that they both graduated, I have like 2 or 3 more years until I'm completely unable to use examples from them. So I have to use them while I can. A male group member keeps calling the other group members girls, even when asked to stop, because they consider it to be disrespectful. What design components are the issues here? How could you hopefully head this off with good design? Social skills. This is a social skills issue. And you might be able to build in a little bit of group processing with it too. So if you're having them work together over time, you could use the group processing question that I put up before, which was give each group member, tell them one thing that you appreciated about their contributions. But you could, over time, as they've worked together, you can also add in like, make one suggestion for how they could work with the group differently. You could also talk about it as a whole class, go over some of this social skills expectations, like we talk to each other respectfully. That's good, Lynn. Sorry. We talk to each other respectfully. We acknowledge people's group contributions. But Lynn's suggestion, ask him to repeat the other students' names. You can do that. And honestly, if you have somebody who's being really rude, you can just pull them aside and say, this is what I've been noticing. And this is what I recommend that you do. Because perhaps they literally need social skills instruction. Maybe the rude group member thinks he's being cute by calling them girls. And maybe you need to pull them aside and say, actually, they see this as really disrespectful. And as part of our classroom behaviors that we talk to each other with respect, and we use the terms for each other that we like to use. So for example, I would like you to call me Dr. Croyle. Not you folks, by the way. So here's a few final tips, things to keep in mind. Oh, except they're secret. Secret tips. Oh, I'm over time, aren't I? I'm supposed to end it too. I'll go over them really fast. Keep your groups really small, 2 to 3. Lots of problems can be solved that way. Assign your students to groups. Do not let them pick their own groups. Plan your lessons with care, especially initially. At the beginning, really emphasize positive interdependence and individual accountability. When you plan a cooperative lesson, just make sure you got both of those. Approach your extended cooperative papers or projects with care. If it's extended over more than one group period, you got to make sure you have a cooperative goal. Completing cannot be the goal. Be sure to teach interaction skills and build and get acquainted activities. Include some cooperation every day so students can build connections and skills, even if it's just a think, pair, share once a day. And find a partner to work with. I'm happy to be your partner if you want, because the first few times you try an extended one and you try and use the new principles, you may run into gaps. You may think you've built in positive interdependence, but you really haven't, for example. So it's good to have a partner to work with. And thank you. I will stop sharing and I will grab my resources and drop them in the chat. And then we will be all set. It is great to see you all. Thank you again. And thank you for your contributions. Okay, so I've got there a checklist for you with some suggested ways to build in each of the pieces. And I have the slides from the presentation. So thank you again. And thank you, John.
Thank you. That was really good. I'll stop the recording.
Sorry, I was